Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? A friend who turned against you? A family member who hurt you deeply? Imagine being sold by your own brothers, left for dead, forgotten in prison, but then rising to power in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Joseph, a journey from pain to purpose. And if you're facing betrayal today, this story will show you that God is still working behind the scenes. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Joseph was just 17 years old when God gave him a dream. In this dream, he saw himself ruling over his brothers. But instead of celebrating, they hated him for it. His own flesh and blood, filled with envy. Have you ever had a vision for your future, but instead of support, you faced resistance? Joseph's dreams weren't just about power, they were about purpose. But he didn't know that yet. One day, Joseph was sent to check on his brothers in the fields. But little did he know, they had a plan. As soon as they saw him, they threw him into a deep pit and sat down to eat as if nothing had happened. Then they did something unimaginable. They saw a group of traders passing by and sold their own brother into slavery. Can you imagine the pain? The betrayal? Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Joseph's journey was far from over, but so was God's plan. Joseph was taken to Egypt, where he was sold to a high-ranking officer named Potiphar. But instead of being bitter, Joseph worked hard. He stayed faithful, and soon he was put in charge of everything Potiphar owned. But just when things seemed to be getting better, another test came. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him. When Joseph refused, she falsely accused him, and he was thrown into prison. Have you ever done the right thing only to suffer for it? Joseph's faith was being tested, but the story wasn't over yet. Years passed, but even in prison, Joseph didn't stop using his gifts. He interpreted dreams for fellow prisoners. And one day, Pharaoh himself had a troubling dream. No one could explain it, except Joseph. He told Pharaoh that 7 years of plenty were coming, followed by 7 years of famine. And in one divine moment, Joseph was lifted from the prison to the palace, becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. From betrayal to blessing, from forgotten to favored, God had never left him. Many years passed. A great famine came, and Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy food. They stood in front of Joseph, but they did not know it was him. Joseph looked at them. These were the same brothers who had hurt him, who had sold him as a slave. Now he had a choice. Should he punish them, or should he forgive? Joseph took a deep breath. Tears filled his eyes. And then he said something amazing. "Do not be afraid. You meant to hurt me, but God used it for good." Instead of being angry, Joseph forgave his brothers. He hugged them and gave them food. His heart was full of love because he knew God had a plan. Forgiveness is powerful. When we forgive, we show love, just like Joseph did. True power is not in rising above your enemies, but in forgiving them. Maybe today you feel like Joseph, betrayed, forgotten, suffering for doing the right thing. But hear this, God is not done with your story. What the enemy meant for harm, God is turning for good. The pit is not your final destination. The prison is not your end. Your palace moment is coming. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe God is working behind the scenes in your life, type Amen in the comments.